Hey there, Shakers, and welcome back to another episode of Worth Your Salt, the podcast that's here to supercharge your marketing in the health and wellness space. I'm Jennifer Orechwa, StoryBrand Certified Guide, and over the past 2 decades, my team and I have tested, iterated, and figured out what it takes to market and grow so you don't have to. Now I'm here to help you apply the marketing systems that truly work. At Salt Marketing, we're all about helping wellness practitioners like you build trust, authority, and a nonstop flow of clients. So if you're ready to take your practice to the next level, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Today's episode is going to be a game changer if you've ever wondered whether paid ads are really worth it for your practice. Maybe you've tried boosting a few Facebook posts that went nowhere, or maybe you've avoided ads altogether because they just feel like setting cash on fire. Either way, you're going to love this conversation. I'm joined today by Andy Janaitis, the founder and chief strategist at PPC Pitbulls. Andy helps real-world founders cut through the noise and simplify their ad strategies so they actually deliver results. With over a decade of experience in analytics, engineering, and digital strategy, Andy has built a reputation for turning overwhelming ad campaigns into clean, measurable systems that fuel sustainable growth. And here's where you'll want to listen in. Andy specializes in working with small businesses and e-commerce brands to scale past 7 figures using Google and Meta ads. But his no-hype, no-guesswork approach is exactly what wellness practitioners need to know to move beyond referrals and start growing with confidence. Andy, welcome to Worth Your Salt.
Thanks for having me.
So, Andy, we usually start with a little bit of a backstory on Worth Your Salt. I would love to hear a little bit about your history, what drew you to helping small businesses simplify paid advertising.
Definitely, yeah. So I come to this field from a background in engineering. So you'll notice as we talk, I typically have a very analytical take on most of these things. I'm all about kind of knowing your numbers. But I've been working in the agency space for about 15 years now. And over the years, I've supported a lot of very large clients. I've started my career in the government space. And then I've also worked with some kind of enterprise level clients. And I found that over the years, I really, really enjoyed working with small businesses because it's kind of like working with a real person, as opposed to serving a very small team in a very large organization. There's a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of red tape. It's really nice to have the opportunity to be able to make an impact and say, hey, I think you should change this, or this thing needs to change about your offer, your positioning in order to make your ads work better. And have the person on the other side of the phone be able to say, oh yeah, that's great advice. Let's do that. And I can get that in play tomorrow. So that's really what I enjoy about doing this. Yeah.
I have the same feeling. I love working with small businesses because we can affect change so quickly. We can iterate. I mean, marketing is iteration. We can do that, turn on a dime where you can't do that in a larger organization. But I am a little curious about the name PPC Pitbulls. And for those in the audience who don't know, PPC is pay per click. So I'm curious about how you named your company that.
Exactly. Yeah, we have I call her our mascot. She's not in the background here. I'd turn the camera around so you could see her. But we have a little pocket-sized pit bull who hangs around in my work from home office here.
Very nice. So A lot of wellness practitioners that we work with feel like paid ads are really a black hole where marketing dollars just go to die. So why do so many small businesses waste money on ads, and how do you help them avoid that?
Yeah. So there's a lot of different things out there. I'm sure, anybody who's listening to this podcast, you probably spent some time, digging through, and there's a lot of advice, a lot of different tactics and gurus out there kind of throwing a lot of advice at you. The most important thing, and this is where I really take kind of a analytic approach and numerical approach, you've got to know that you're measuring the outcomes of every ad that you're running. So it's amazing how often new clients will come to us and we'll dig into their ad account and say, oh, we spend $5,000 a month for the last 3 months. And, I'm not really sure if it's moving the needle or not. It's like, well, what do you mean? How did we get to this point? Where we're not really sure. There's some purchases coming in. We don't know if they came from the ads or didn't come from the ads. So first and foremost, it's really, really important that you have your tracking set up and that you absolutely know, one, when purchases are occurring, and two, you have some good idea of kind of where they're coming from, whether it's coming from organic content that you're putting out, it's coming from, your Google ads that you're running, your Meta ads that you're running. But I think that's one of the biggest things that brands get into trouble with is that, especially, working with an agency, they may come in and, oftentimes agencies are really good at showing you the creative and these beautiful images that they've created. And hey, check out these ads are running for you. But they kind of leave out the part of like, hey, is it working or not? Is it profitable? Really, holding both your internal team and any agencies that you're working to account that you've got to know those numbers and you've got to understand, where your investment's going and whether it's working.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And because it's hard. I mean, you often talk about making ads measurable and sustainable. And so what does that mean in plain language for a wellness practice?
Yeah. So the big thing, first of all, is not spending more than you can afford to spend. So a lot of times, people will get talked into trying this new hot ad approach and say, oh, in order to make it work, you've got to put up $5,000 a month or something like that. And for a lot of brands, maybe that's right. Maybe that's, kind of the stage that they're at in their growth. But you've got to understand where you're at. And if you can't afford to spend it, like how you described earlier, at the end of the day, there's a lot of experimentation that's going on with all of this. So in the first month when you're running ads, they may not be profitable right out the gate. You want to have everything set up as fundamentally as possible. But you've got to also understand that there's going to be some testing and some iteration that goes on. So if you can't afford to kind of lose that first month of spend as you're learning and getting to profitability, you can really get yourself in a hole pretty quickly. And then not only have you lost that money, if you then have to turn off your ads, you haven't really gained anything because you're not even able to kind of put into practice the learnings that you created. But then beyond that, yeah, it's having it measured, and understanding, what results are happening when somebody actually clicks the ad. What are they doing when they hit your site? Knowing what your goals are, and then are you working towards them?
Yeah, absolutely. CTA and making sure you're telling people what you want them to do. And you talked about overspending. Obviously that's a big mistake. But what's really kind of the biggest mistake that you see small service-based businesses make when they're trying to copy like big brand ad strategies?
Yeah. So we talked a lot about measurement, and I do think that's fundamental. But we've spent a little bit of time on that. That is probably one of the biggest ones. But I think the other big thing when folks come to us is that they don't really know what their goals are, right? So they'll say, "Hey, I've got to run ads. Somebody told me I've got to be on Google ads, or somebody told me I've got to be on Meta ads," and they don't quite understand like what they're trying to get out of it or what they're trying to do with the ads. So I always, when asked, people will often say, oh, well, I want more revenue, or, hey, I need more clients. But you have to start to get a little bit more clear as, we can almost guarantee we could get you more clients, but it's a question of at what rate, how much is it going to cost you to bring in those clients? Or, maybe particular clients are good clients for you or very profitable clients, and particular clients are often not as profitable as others. So, are we growing with the right demographics or in the right geographies? There's a lot of nuance to it and a lot of different outcomes that can come from your ads, and the strategy should reflect that. So I think a lot of times people work the opposite way, and they'll hear some guru telling them, hey, check it out, you've got to have an influencer helping you to sell on Instagram. They say, okay, so that's what I'm going to do. And they go and they, pick out, that's exactly the strategy that they're going to take, or the tactic that they're going to take. And they don't really realize, like, what am I trying to do in my business? What stage of growth am I in? How many clients do I even need to be bringing in? Is that the right tactic to help me meet those goals? So I'd say that's the number one mistake I see people make, and the number one fundamental that people, before you even think about ads, get really clear on what are you trying to get out of ads, and what is it that you'd really like to see come from your ads?
Yeah, I love that. And we're pretty big on goal setting too. We have a lot of clients who come to us and they're like, we just want to grow. I'm like, that's not a goal.
Exactly.
That's a wish and a dream. So a lot of our clients also rely a lot on referrals and word of mouth. So how do you know when it's the right time to start running paid ads, to sort of transition from that referral word of mouth ecosystem into something that's a little bit bigger, a little bit broader in paid ads?
Yeah, I definitely feel for clients there, because we're a small business, small boutique agency, and that's kind of how we and most agencies kind of start their growth story. But then you realize that at a certain point, that's all well and good. And if you're, putting out good work, typically you have good word of mouth, good referrals coming in. But if you hit a down month, you don't have a knob to turn. So that's always kind of one thing I like to kind of have in the back of my head is like, there's going to be a time where for whatever reason, business dries up and those referrals start to dry up, based on other economic factors that are outside of your control. And at that time, you want to have a knob to turn. And that's where I think paid ads can really be great in that you actually have something to do differently in those times. As far as kind of like, when is the right time to get those started? I really like that idea of starting to grow with your referral and word of mouth first, because you want to have that baseline. You always, it's not really an this or that, or one is better than the other. We always take a very holistic approach. And honestly, if you have that referral, you have good kind of organic positioning in the market, you're going to have much better ads. Your ads are going to be much more profitable anyway. So I always like to tell people, you want to make sure that you have some purchases coming in regardless of the ad. So you don't want to be starting out and saying, hey, I'm going to hang up a shingle, I'm opening my practice, and I'm going to get started day one. Ads are the way that I'm going to fill it out. Typically say, work with whether it be friends and family. Maybe it's that you show up to the locals farmers market and you're handing out pamphlets, like those types of approaches, just to get your first few people. It doesn't have to be the most profitable approach to growth ever. It's just getting some people in the door so that you can prove out product market fit. And then once you get to that point, I think that's where you can start to say, okay, let me see how I can layer on an ad approach. Now that you have, because in doing that, you've already created an offer that is valuable to people. You've figured out a price point. People are actually willing to pay for that product and to come in to and get your service or get your product. And now you're ready to start to scale. Now that you've had some of those things kind of hammered out.
I love that. And you and I are kind of singing the same song, but we are an organic first agency. And so we often teach our clients that organic first, prove it out, make sure that it's doing what it needs to do, and then layer in paid advertising. Once you've got a concept proven, your offer is solid, and you know that it works organically, then is the time to run, because you can run paid ads to a bad offer and you're going to get the same bad results. So,
Exactly.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, can you share a quick success story of a brand or a practice that really scaled profitably with ads once they had that right system in place?
Yeah, one great brand that's in the health and wellness space, so it would definitely kind of resonate with your audience. We work with a brand called Plantar Tech, and it's actually run by a podiatrist who was seeing that there was a gap in the market. They didn't have, it's a strap for plantar fasciitis, hence the name Plantar Tech. And they were looking for something that was just a little bit more comfortable. That market has a lot of these kind of big, bulky boots that are uncomfortable to wear. It's tough to sleep in. They created this really lightweight, just comfortable strap that you could wear overnight. And it's really great product that, came directly out of conversations with their own patients, and just a really beautiful product. But as they were getting going, they were able to sell some to existing patients, but it really just wasn't taking off as they tried to come to market. They put it up on a website. They had another agency doing some content work for them. And it was kind of like they were screaming into the void a little bit. And that's where we came in, and we were able to come up with really a very simple kind of baseline Google Ads approach, where we came in. Our first approach for them was to market using Google Ads to people who are already searching for plantar fasciitis relief. And that's what Google is great for. I'm sure we'll get a chance to talk about that in a bit here, but Google does really well when somebody already has that intent. You already know that they're in market, they're searching for your product. So that's what we were able to kind of set up for them. We use Performance Max as one of the key tools in the Google toolbox these days. And we're able to help them kind of get off the ground and get to a level where they were getting, I think in 2024, they got 500 purchases just from online ads. And that's, not crazy. It's not, blowing off. They're not, having $1 million year coming out of that. But that was good results that they were able to scale, and the ad spend was at a reasonable level that they were able to afford as well as they were growing. And now that we're at that point, we have a number of other approaches that we're able to kind of layer on top of that, between working with influencers to get a little bit more content to feed those ads, between moving them over to a new website on Shopify. There's a lot of different things that we're able to do that will kind of ramp up those initial results that we were able to kind of prove out in the marketplace. So we're really, really proud of, being able to help them get started and kind of get off the ground with that.
Yeah, smart. That's encouraging. All right, we need to take a
Yeah.
quick sponsorship break right now, but when we come back, I want to get into your simple steps to finally run campaigns that will deliver real patients and clients. We'll be right back.
Running a med spa isn't just about beautiful results. It's about building a beautiful business, too. That's where Maven Financial Partners comes in. Maven specializes in helping wellness businesses like med spas and aesthetic clinics master their money. From tracking profitability to forecasting growth, so you can finally stop guessing and start scaling with confidence. Whether you're struggling to understand your numbers or ready to expand to your next location, Maven's team knows this industry inside and out. Grab a free business consultation today at mavenfp.com. And while you're there, order their must-read guide, MedSpa Profitability, to start transforming your practice from successful to truly scalable. That's mavenfp.com.
We're back here on the Worth Your Salt podcast with Andy Janaitis of PPC Pitbulls. And so, Andy, if I'm a wellness practitioner and I'm thinking about ads, what are some of the essentials I should have in place before I start spending money?
So we've talked about a lot of them already. Some of the things that I really like to focus on is, one, make sure that you're tracking your analytics. If you're just getting started, a super simple way to do that is a tool called Google Analytics. A lot of people refer to that as GA4. That's the newest version that's out there. That's kind of like table stakes. So to get your website set up, absolutely you should have GA4 installed and have it set up properly so that you're tracking when people hit the site. Are they making a purchase? Are they adding items to the cart? Are they, booking an appointment with you? All of the different behaviors that you would like them to be executing on your website. So that's number one. We also talked a little bit about knowing what your goals are. So understanding, hey, it's not just I'm running ads because somebody out there told me I need to be running ads. It's, what's the particular type of growth and the type of, what are you trying to get done? Because that's going to really impact the strategy that you use. One more thing, and this again, something we kind of mentioned, was getting some purchases in. So this is going to help test out your website, make sure that people are able to purchase, but then also prove out that offer. Make sure that there's product market fit, that it's a valuable offer that people are willing to pay the price that you're asking them to pay for. I think once you have those pieces in place, all of that is going to help you kind of learn how to tell your story, and you have a good, strong product that you can speak to authentically because it's delivering real value for customers. And that's where your ads are going to really thrive, when you have, kind of an authentic story to tell, and layering that into the ads.
Yeah, and we're big on storytelling too, so I'm right there with you on that one. I want to go back to something that you said a minute ago about how Google ads are great for somebody who's already in market. So if we're looking at, and most of the wellness businesses that we work with, they go straight for Meta. So where should a wellness practice start? How do you decide which platform makes the most sense?
Yeah, this is where the goals make a big difference. We like to think about what are the unique goals for a business, as well as what are some of the constraints of the business, and where that comes into the conversation of Google versus Meta. And those are kind of the two biggest ad platforms. So I always kind of tell people, you're probably going to want to start, when you're ready to start with paid ads, you're probably going to find yourself on one of those two platforms, especially if you're D2C. That's, kind of one of the two places. And what Meta does a really good job of, because it's very visual, you have an opportunity to get in front of somebody and to educate them a little bit. So we call that like interruption-based marketing. Somebody's, just scrolling through their TikTok feed or their Instagram feed, similar story. They're looking through Instagram Reels, and they see your video. You're able to kind of tell a story, introduce yourself, introduce your service, and tell them about your key differentiators. So where I think that works really, really well, it's interruption. You're kind of interrupting them when they weren't necessarily looking to buy anything. Where that works really well is for the types of services where somebody doesn't really even know they need it before they get started. So you kind of think of it like if you have a wellness practice where you are pioneering a new technique or a new way of helping people to achieve a particular outcome. That's where Meta is going to be great, because you've got the opportunity to get in front of them and show them why your technique or your service is so great and so valuable to help them meet their needs. On the other hand, if you have a particular service or product that people already know they need. They're already searching for. That example we gave earlier, plantar fasciitis. Somebody already has a problem. They say, hey, I need something where I got to be able to get this fixed. That's where Google comes in, because on Google, people are already making the search and you're placing your ad in front of people that have already expressed the intent to buy that particular product. So that's kind of the breakdown. At the end of the day, it's experimental and it's different for every business. But I think that's the kind of the first way that new brands should think about is, when you're getting somebody to buy your product, do you find that you need to give them the 90-second elevator pitch about what makes your product so special and differentiated in the market first, or why, even this is a product or a service that even exists? Or is your product the type where people already know they need it and you're just telling them like, hey, I am the best, blank in category?
That's really good advice. I've worked with a lot of wellness practitioners, and oftentimes the early in the conversation, I will say, what's worked in the past, what hasn't worked in the past. And they'll tell me that they've tried to run paid ads, but it brought in the wrong kind of leads. And so usually what I do there is, well, do we define our ideal client profile? Do we know who that person is? And we talked about the customer journey. But how can we use targeting or messaging and adjust that to bring in the right kind of clients?
Yeah. So there's two real ways that you can do this. One is the more technical, more complex way, and that's with offline conversion events. So earlier I was telling you all about tracking in the context of, hey, you've got to know when somebody hits your site, if they ultimately fill out a lead form or download your free PDF lead magnet, or whatever action you're trying to get them to take, or, click to call on the phone number on the site. That's all great. And that's, data that's sent from the browser. The next step, though, if you're really tracking, and this is typically going to be if you have a higher ticket item where it makes sense to put in the work to actually track this properly, you can actually track the people who are better leads. So not only did they fill out the form or in some way contact you and get on your radar, but then 3 weeks later, they ultimately converted and became a long-term paying customer. We can pass that data back into Google and Meta so that you're not optimizing just to people who filled out the initial form. You're optimizing to people who are actually the type of people that you want to be clients in the long term. So that's the best in practice, the best way to do it. Oftentimes, especially for small businesses, that's not going to be super realistic, depending on, what your technical stack is. That can be, pretty costly to get that implemented properly. So the next best thing you can do, and this is kind of to your point, is make sure that the creative that you're using is speaking to the particular types of people who tend to be, the best. So we always say with ads, and this kind of goes for organic content as well, you never want to be tricking anybody. There should never be a surprise, right? So if you are creating an ad that is promising the world and then they hit your site and find out, oh, it's actually going to cost way more than the original ad implied, or, hey, I get to the site and realize that they don't have availability for me. So it's not actually something that's good for me. What you've done is paid for that click. And at the same time, you've gotten somebody to your site that is a bad lead or somebody who is never going to be a good fit in the first place. So what you want to make sure you're doing with any creative you're putting out, whether it be video creative, image creative, make sure that you're authentically telling the story of what your service actually is, and putting it all out there. You want to pre-qualify on the front end because, as you mentioned earlier, PPCs, pay-per-click, most of these ad platforms, everything you're doing, you're paying once the person clicks through. So if somebody clicks through and they're not a good fit, you didn't help yourself. You paid for somebody who's ultimately not going to purchase from you. What you want to do is, use your messaging and your targeting to pre-qualify and get in front of people who are actually people you can help and deliver real value for. And that's going to help a lot.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And, of course, budget is always a concern. And I'm wondering, how do we determine a realistic starting point for ad spend for like a small practice? How should they think about ROI? And I'm not necessarily looking for like a dollar figure here. How do we determine that? Like, is it based on cost per click? Is it based on cost per lead? How do we determine what a good starting point is to throw enough money at it to see, is this going to work, but not so much that we're overspending or losing our shirts?
Yeah. So typically, most of the things that most of the ways that we measure ads are going to come out to some multiple between the spend that you're putting in and the value you're getting out. So two common ways we can look at this. One is ROAS, or return on ad spend, is essentially the revenue that you get divided by, the dollars in ad spend. So if somebody bought a $5 product and you put up $1 in ad spend, that would be a 5x ROAS. The other way we can think of that is customer acquisition costs. So what are the number of dollars of ad spend we need to put in before that person becomes a customer? So we got 5 customers and ultimately we needed to run $10 worth of ads. That's a $2 cost per acquisition because, we got one customer for every $2. So when you think about those two things, you got to recognize that in market, most of those variables are going to trend towards, there's a lot of different factors, but they're going to trend towards, your competition and your industry averages, right? So think about it in the sense of, if you have a practice where your average customer is going to be paying you $1,000 a month, chances are most of your competitors have a fairly similar offer point. So when they're advertising to get in front of the same people, they're going to be willing to pay, more or less, based on what that point is. The amount that they're willing to pay is going to be based on that about $1,000 a month piece. So all that to say, if you have a much more expensive service, chances are you're going to need to pay more to get each customer into that service. And if you have a much cheaper service, if you have an offer of, hey, try us out for $15 for your first month, you can probably get those leads a lot cheaper than if you're asking people to sign up for $1,000 for a first month commitment kind of thing. So those are some of the big factors that you need to balance as you're making this decision. Ultimately, we want to be passing back 30 to 50 conversions to a Google or a Meta. So you can kind of back out in your head, well, if I need to get 30 purchases, and that's the data that I'm going to be passing back into Google or Meta, and I know how much my product or service costs, I know how much I'm willing to spend on ad costs to get that customer, you can start to calculate out, okay, what's it going to cost me to get my first 30 to 50 clients? Let me plan on spending about that amount in my first month. Obviously, that can get a little bit complex, and there's a lot of different factors that go into that. So I always kind of tell people, we don't want to necessarily, because of all those different factors, we don't want to necessarily hang our hat on a single number. But if somebody has no idea where to start, I usually say somewhere in like the $1,000 to $1,500 range, probably a good enough place for a small business to start. We're going to have some data coming in. And at the same time, hopefully you're not losing your shirt over, $1,500 in ad spend. That's kind of the rough, in the absence of any other information, that's kind of where I'd start you out.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And so I want to make sure that I understood that. I'm going to make sure everybody who's listening understood that I hear it goes back to your goals. So determine your goals, and that will help you determine your ad spend. And we want to make sure that we know our value of every client, because that's how much you're able to spend to get a new one. Am I understanding that right? Okay, great.
That's great. Exactly it. You've got to know, before you can figure out if your ads are profitable, you've got to know, what can you afford to spend on somebody? What does it mean to be profitable?
Perfect. All right, Andy, it's time for another quick break. We'll be right back after this. You're listening to the Worth Your Salt podcast, and today I'm talking with Andy Janaitis, founder and chief strategist at PPC Pitbulls. Andy helps small businesses and wellness practices cut through the noise and finally make paid ads work without the waste, the hype, or the overwhelm. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so be sure to join us over on Instagram, LinkedIn, or Facebook, and let us know how you're setting your practice up for a successful paid strategy. We're back. And so, Andy, before the break, you were walking us through how wellness practitioners can actually see results from their paid advertising. So we've covered the essentials to get started. Now I really want to look at what's coming next. Paid has changed a lot in recent years, and what's working right now didn't work a couple of years ago and vice versa. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I would say the biggest change as an overall trend is we're focused, or we're relying a lot more on AI, kind of an AI backend to do your bidding, to do your targeting, finding the audience, figuring out how much you're going to pay to get in front of each person. Whether you're in Google or Meta, those decisions were relying a lot more on AI bidding models than we used to. So what that means is it's much more important that you're measuring what's happening on the site, passing good, clean data back into these platforms, and then ultimately simplifying your campaign structure. So whereas in the old days, you would probably want to have separate campaigns for every possible ideal client or every possible search that they could possibly be making if you're talking about Google. And it was a lot more manual. You wanted to say, hey, if somebody's searching this very specific long tail keyword, I'm willing to bid a little bit more because I think they're further down the funnel. And if this person is searching this other keyword, I'll bid a little bit less because, I still want to get in front of them, but they, may be higher up in the funnel. We're not making any of those decisions manually anymore. At this point, it's saying, hey, here's my total budget, here's my goal, and here's the creative assets that you can use to run. Now, Google or Meta, go to it. Go out and get me in front of the best possible people to help me meet that goal. And you'll hear people talk about on Google, that means performance max, oftentimes is the campaign structure for that. And on Meta, that's Advantage Plus is what they call that kind of, bundle of bidding tools.
So we've talked a lot about Google and Meta. Are there any emerging ad platforms that wellness practices should be keeping an eye on? Like we've talked with some of our clients about LinkedIn. We've talked about Pinterest. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think those are some of the places. TikTok is another huge one. Some of these platforms are going to have room, especially. It's very brand specific, I should say. So for instance, something like TikTok is going to work great if your practice is specifically going after a younger audience, because that's typically where that skews. LinkedIn is going to be great if you're running a practice to help entrepreneurs develop mindfulness in their work-life balance, something like that. Perfect. That's you want to go to where your audience or your ideal clients are hanging out. So in that case, LinkedIn might be a great place. I always kind of caveat though, and I mentioned this earlier, for D2C especially, there's just so much reach on Google and Meta for small businesses. As you're starting out, you're probably going to be best off to really rely on those two platforms and get as much as you can out of those platforms before you go and find more reach in some of those other places. So I would say certainly test them out. And especially if you're kind of working more from an organic perspective, by all means, go ahead and try short form content on TikTok if that kind of fits authentically with your brand. But at the end of the day, especially from an ad perspective, just as you're starting out, you're probably going to get the most bang for your buck out of either Google or Meta.
Perfect. And for anybody who doesn't know, D2C is direct to consumer, which is definitely what most wellness practices are. So if you're a wellness practitioner and you want to future-proof your paid strategy, what should you be looking at? What should you be thinking about? What should you put in place?
So I think it's a lot of the things that we talked about. So you want to make sure you're measuring the results really well. You're passing that data back into whatever platform you're using. And then it's just, you're going to need to stay on top of the latest trends in these particular tools. Unfortunately, they're changing every day. It's even as somebody who's in Google and Meta ads on a regular basis, I'll pop in. Oftentimes I'll be doing a client presentation and, go to say, oh yeah, check this out. Let's go look at these results here. And all of a sudden, the menu item isn't there where you thought it was, or all of a sudden, settings have changed and the way that you access something is different. These platforms are changing so quickly. And especially with the rise of AI, there's a lot of new features and a lot of new capabilities that never used to be there before. And a lot of it can really help if you're utilizing it properly, can help, get the most out of these platforms. And a lot of it too, Google and Meta both are most interested in getting you to spend as much as they can on their platform. So a lot of their suggestions and recommendations aren't always the best, So it does take the time, right? At the end of the day, as long as you're measuring, you understand what your real results are. At that point, it's just a matter of putting the time in to kind of understand what's happening in the platform, where the direction of the platform is going, where the technical trends are, and then also just making sure that you're kind of staying on top of what's resonating with your customers. The nice part about all of this is I think it's continually trending more and more towards authenticity. So it's less about the tricks and what you need to do to get the best backlinks from an SEO perspective or something like that, and it's just hey, real marketing these days, I think, is just authentically telling your story and having a product that's authentically valuable to your customers.
That's great advice. I love that. Andy, I know you have some great resources available on your website. Can you tell us where to find those?
Yeah, so you can come check us out at ppcpitbulls.com, and we'll actually have a special page just for listeners of the site to kind of group any resources together. It'll be ppcpitbulls.com/salt.
Perfect. And of course, if you want to learn more about Andy and PPC and Pitbulls, you should check out his website, find him on YouTube. He shares practical insights on scaling with ads there. All of that will be linked up on our website as well at saltmarketing.co. But right now, Andy, I would love to go into our lightning round questions. These are a few quick questions I like to ask of every guest. Are you ready?
All right. Yeah.
So, all right, first question. What is something about you that often surprises people?
I was preparing for the lightning round and dreading this question a little bit. I like to think I'm a bit of an open book, so I don't know that I have a great answer. I'll say I like to cook. That's one of my, kind of one of my hobbies, and
Very good.
Yeah, love to do that.
I guess that goes along with engineering. It would still be a little surprising, but what's your favorite thing about the work that you do?
And we talked about it a little bit earlier. I love working with small businesses because it's really just like we've for better or worse, kind of resisted against niching down over the years. And it's amazing, kind of the fun little niche businesses that we bump into, like types of things where you say, I would never even have thought that was a business. And then to kind of go along with that, the characters that run these businesses. So I love just meeting new people and learning about, people's interesting passions and businesses.
I love that. It never fails to amaze me that people come up with things to make businesses out of where I'm like, how did you dare to invent into a business? That's good stuff.
Exactly, yeah.
So Andy, what's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
One of my first managers, when I first came out of college, had me sit down and kind of plan out a 5-year plan as I was going in. I hadn't really thought too much about that before. I was looking to get a job and hopefully do well and grow in that job. But kind of spend some time really understanding, both business, but also in your personal life, kind of like where are you going and what are you trying to do? I think that translates to a lot of the business advice we gave, even from like a paid ads perspective. It's like, the answer is not just you're running paid ads. It's why are you doing this? What are you trying to get out of it? Where are we going in the long term? And how does this fit into that strategy? So that's something I really rely on now. And I spend a lot of time, kind of making sure I come back to that, because it's very easy to kind of miss that in the day-to-day as you're getting things done. So I like to spend some time on a monthly basis just to come back to, where's our guiding North Star.
Absolutely. That is really good advice. All right, last question. Who's inspiring you right now? What podcast are you listening to, or what's the best book that you've read recently? Yeah,
so I've been trying to read a lot more recently. Set aside some time for it. The most recent one I've got pulled out here, Buy Back Your Time. I would say for any business owner, definitely so important. Especially as we think about scaling, it always feels like there's not enough hours in the day. And finding different strategies to, understand how to offload what isn't important and how to really focus in on your area of genius and kind of what's going to drive the most impact.
I love that. We'll make sure we link that up in the show notes too. Andy, thank you so much for joining me today on Worth Your Salt.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I also want to thank you, Salt Nation. And of course, if today's conversation has you thinking, I'm ready to take my marketing to the next level, that's exactly what we're here for at Salt Marketing. Our social edge system is designed to help wellness practitioners like you attract new clients, convert them into loyal fans, and finally get marketing that works without the guesswork. If you have a great success story, I'd love to talk with you and share your story. To tell us why you're worth your salt by emailing us at grow@saltmarketing.co. Of course, be sure to subscribe to Worth Your Salt so you never miss an episode. Finally, leave us a review or give the show a handful of stars wherever you get your content. That's all for this episode of Worth Your Salt. Be sure to join us again next time. In the meantime, let's get out there and shake things up.